Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome dear learners. This is a video for the subject of education, for the course of Bachelor's in Education and for the paper of Conceptual Foundations of Education. Here we are going to have a discussion on philosophical basis of education, and in this lecture we will discuss the educational ideas of Paulo Freire. This video is being recorded by Dr. Iram Khan. The course coordinator and the presenter of this video is Dr. Iram Khan from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. The academic expert or reviewer for this video is Professor Jasim Ahmed from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. This video is produced under the project DTH Swayam Prabha channels of MHRD and at present the Ministry of Education, Government of India. Hello my dear students, I am Dr. Iram Khan, Assistant Professor at IASC Faculty of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. Today we are going to have a discussion on the philosophical basis of education, and here in this lecture we will be discussing the educational ideas of Paulo Freire. So let us start the discussion first with the objectives. The objectives of this lecture are to discuss the life history of Paulo Freire, to explain the various educational ideas of Paulo Freire in terms of his philosophy of education, to elaborate the significance of the ideas of Freire with respect to education in our country. Let us just have a look on the brief life history of Paulo Freire. His full name was Paulo Regulus Neves Freire, and he was born in Brazil in 1921. He was an educator, a philosopher who was a leading advocate of critical pedagogy. He is best known for his influential work, which is popularly called as Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is generally considered one of the foundational texts of the critical pedagogy movement. Freire contributed a philosophy of education which blended classical approaches stemming from Plato and the modern Marxist or the post-Marxist and anti-colonialist thinkers. So we can see that he has got a very renowned place, he has got a very important place whenever we talk about the different philosophies of education. So his contribution is tremendous. Paulo Freire grew up in the northeast of Brazil, where his experiences deeply influenced his entire work of his life. So the world economic crisis forced him to know hunger and poverty at a very young age. In his own words, he has once quoted, "I didn't understand anything because of my hunger. I was not dumb. It wasn't lack of interest. My social condition didn't allow me to have an education. Experience showed me once again the relationship between social class and knowledge." Quotes close. So you can just see that how much uh, these words are reflecting that how this entire poverty and the hunger has made a very kind of impact on his philosophy of life. And because Freire lived among poor rural families and the families of laborers, he gained a deep understanding of their lives and of the effects of social or the socio-economics or a different type of aspects which are related to the economic status of these families. And he has seen the impact on the education on these people who were having a very kind of poor background. Their socio-economic status was very poor. So Freire became a grammar teacher while still he was in high school. Even then, his institution pushed him towards a dialogic education in which he strived to understand students' expectations. And then he got married to Elsa. His wife Elsa influenced him to intensely pursue his studies and helped him to elaborate his groundbreaking educational methods. Freire's complete structure of educational thought began to manifest with his appointment in 1946 as a director of education at CESI, an employers' institution set up to help workers and their families. Here he began to see more disconnections between the elite section of the society or the elitist educational practices and the real lives of the working class. And in the words of the eminent scholar Gadotti, he says that thus a study of the language of the people was the starting point for the development of his work. And by his, he actually means that Paulo Freire's work. And during this time, Freire also participated in the movement for popular culture and supported the active exercise of democracy in lectures and also in his PhD thesis, which was titled as Present Day Education in Brazil, which was basically he did his PhD and the thesis was published in the year 1959. Paulo Freire died in 1997 in the age of 75. But his contributions in terms of the development of this prominent pedagogy is so important to understand, to internalize, and to make it appearing in our curricular systems, that we have to study whenever we are talking about the pedagogy. We have to see that what exactly are the views of Paulo Freire. Let us discuss the pedagogy developed by Paulo Freire. Freire's pedagogy developed in the particular historical and political circumstance, which was very much influenced by neo-colonialism and imperialism. So basically at that time, a lot of transformational changes were happening in the society. And this is the reason why this pedagogy, which is developed by Freire, is very much influenced by the scenario which was happening at his time. Freire's perception of society and the social relations is based on the class relations. He actually observes or he extends his uh, views on the social dynamics through the oppressor oppressed dialectic. So Freire discussed two types of knowledge: unconscious, sometimes the practical knowledge, which can be considered as the practical knowledge, and the critical or the reflective or theory knowledge. So these two types of knowledges are basically discussed by him when he talks about the pedagogy. The beliefs are shaped into knowledge by discussion and critical reflection. Knowledge should not be limited to logic and content or emotions and superstitions, but it should seek the connections between understandings and feelings. So these are those things which have given a kind of structure or a kind of base to the pedagogy which he tried to develop. So Freire's pedagogical critique of banking education and his problem posing pedagogical propositions are rooted in his concept of man. And here by man, because in most of the texts which he has developed, the scriptures and the books, he is uh, denoting human beings as man. So we should not confuse it with that he is not talking about women. Basically, by man, he is talking about the human beings. So Paulo Freire was highly critical of the prevailing educational practices of his time, whatever was actually practiced in terms of education of the children at his time when he was growing up and he was developing his pedagogy. So he called education as it was practiced as the banking concept of education. In this banking concept, education is treated and practiced as a depositing activity. In this depositing act, students become depositories. What does this mean? Like all the knowledge which is basically the teacher is willing to give to the student becomes deposited in him or her. So the student becomes the depository and the teacher becomes the depositor. So the scope of action allowed to the students extends only as far as receiving or filling and storing the deposits. By acting as a depositor, the teacher domesticates the child into oppressor consciousness. So basically by this particular act, a kind of oppression is happening because everything is being imposed, being filled or stored in the minds of the students. So according to Freire, the banking concept of education has done immense damage to teacher-taught relationship and the process of education. Freire's description of banking education and his prescription of problem-posing education are based on his understanding about man, his consciousness and relation to the world. According to Freire, banking education begins with a false understanding of men as objects. Implicit in banking concept is the assumption of a dichotomy between man and the world, because here man is actually disconnected with the world in which this human being is actually living. So man becomes merely the a person who is in the world, not with the world or with others who are again the part of the world. Man is spectator, not the recreator. So basically, he is not participating in the entire act of getting educated. He is just attaining, or he is just passively getting filled in with the knowledge which the teacher is trying to bank in him or her. So he is not participating. This person is not participating in the teaching learning process. So in this view, man is not a conscious being. He or she is rather a possessor of the consciousness. Maybe we can consider him as an empty mind or the passively open mind, which is not actually open to any of those receptions of the deposits of reality from the world outside. So basically everything is happening in a passive way where the knowledge is being deposited by the teacher and the without actually thinking about anything, this person who is getting all those knowledge filled in is accepting whatever is being given to him or her. So in a way, a kind of oppression is happening because there is no any kind of participatory approach or nothing is being done in a way in which the other person who is the receiver is also participating in the process. So in this way, we can see here that a kind of oppression has started and it is going to take place throughout the process. So Freire's pedagogy of literacy education involves not only reading the word, word, but also reading the world. This involves the development of critical consciousness. Why? Because once we are attaining the knowledge or the literacy or the word knowledge, and we are not getting ourselves attached to the world in which we are staying, then this knowledge will be somehow not connected with the surroundings in which we stay. So basically, this involves the development of critical consciousness whenever we are connecting ourselves, the knowledge which we are attaining, with the outside world. In that case, we are trying to develop the critical consciousness. But if we are not doing that, then we are making ourselves deprived with the outside world in which we are staying. So the formation of critical consciousness allows people to question the nature of their historical and social situation, to read this world with the goal of acting as subjects in the creation of a democratic society. So what he says that we should not act as an object, we should act as a subject, so that we can participate in this process where we are getting something and then we have to give back to the world, and this is only possible if we understand the world. So for education, Freire implies a dialogic exchange between teachers and students, where both learn, both question, both reflect, and both participate in the meaning making process. And we know that what exactly this meaning making process is all about. Whenever we talk about the meaning making process, the concept of constructivism comes into picture. But here, the term was not introduced, but he is talking a lot about the meaning making process. He says that both of the sides, the teacher and the student, should make a dialogue between themselves. They both should have the opportunity to question each other. One should not accept whatever is told to him or her by a person who is maybe considered as the teacher or the more knowledgeable other. So both should have the opportunity to reflect and to participate in the meaning making process. So concretely, this pedagogy begins with the teacher who is basically mingling among the community, who is actually participating in the community. He or she is asking questions to the people and gathering a list of words used in their daily lives. Because here I'm just discussing about the pedagogy. At one of his projects, he talked about the literacy education, which has given a lot of impetus to other sort of pedagogical aspects. So this is important to talk about. So here he has actually began with the point that teachers should mingle among the community if we are talking about the literacy education, and he or she should ask questions to the people, and people should be allowed to ask questions to him. And in this way, uh, the gathering of a list of words which are used in the daily lives can happen. The teacher was to begin to understand the social reality of the people and develop a list of generative words and themes which could lead to discussion in the classroom, or maybe any sort of class, or the cultural circles, and wherever there is a possibility of discussion. So by making these words, because here literacy is the important thing on which he is talking about. So by making words which are relevant to the lives of people, the process of conscientization could begin, in which the social construction of reality might be critically examined. So from here you can see that he is starting to talk about the conscientization, and he is trying to understand the lives of the people in terms of educating them. Whenever we talk about the lives of the people, we have to see the social construction in which these people are the part of. Freire has talked about problem posing in education a lot. The program content of problem posing education is generated from the investigation into this thematic universe. Banking education, through its pedagogy, works for the continuation of domination. On the other hand, the problem posing education, through its pedagogy, thrives for liberation, because we all know that if one problem is posed by a person and the other person is trying to solve the problem or to make the solutions done, then there will be the collaborative action happening. So here there will be no kind of banking activity. So Freire has proposed a pedagogy to conscientize human beings based on praxis and dialogue. Conscientization constitutes both growing critical awareness of the learner by himself or herself and a willingness to act on the reality to change the entire process. Praxis is interwoven methodological state of human action and reflection, whereas dialogue is not only a method of education but also an existential necessity for humanization. Because whenever a dialogue is happening, we are respecting the points which are made by one person and the other person basically is going to react on it. So there is a reciprocation of the thought process happening in terms of making the dialogue. So we can say that here the humanization uh, point of view is taken care of. So in this way, learning is a process where knowledge is presented to all of us, and then it is shaped through understanding, discussion, and reflection. Education should raise the awareness of the students so that they become subjects, and they should not act as an object. So they become the subject who are going to participate in this world, so that they can get themselves educated in a way that they become a citizen who can actually think of. So this was something which was emphasized by Paulo Freire a lot. So that this is done by teaching students to think democratically and to continually question and make meaning from everything they learn. So they should not passively attain or just accept whatever is being given to them. Basically, they are supposed to question. If they don't agree with what is taught to them, they should disagree, they should question, and the teacher should also be very much accepting. The teacher should be having that much caliber, that much courage, that the question must be accepted. The question made by the student must be accepted by him or her, and then there should be a discussion, there should be a dialogue happening between the teacher and the taught, and in this due course of this dialogue, the meaning making process happens, and the knowledge automatically is being attained by this thought. As well, the teacher is getting awakened. The teacher is also adding up some sort of knowledge to his own, uh, you can say, the collection of the knowledge which this teacher is having. So we can't say that only the student is attaining or gaining. Basically, the teacher is also learning in the same way in which the taught is being, uh, you can say, the taught is attaining from this dialogue. So both are being very much, you can say, becoming much more knowledgeable by this dialogue being happened between the teacher and the taught. Freire firmly believed that knowing is a social process whose individual dimension, however, cannot be forgotten or even devalued. So, the social process on which he has given a lot of emphasis, basically, he says that society or the processes which are happening in the lives or while we are staying in a scenario in this world, those experiences which we are gaining, these cannot be forgotten, and even these cannot be uh, devalued. The process of knowing, which evolves or which involves the whole conscious self, or the feelings, emotions, memory, affects, an epistemological curious mind focused on the object equally involves other thinking subjects. And what exactly this means? That others also capable of knowing, and they can be curious. So we cannot think of that this curiosity can only be in the mind of the student. Basically, the teacher is also, and he or she should also be curious, equally curious, and equally focused on any of those things or on any of those subject matters on which this knowledge transfer, like transiting process is being happened. So this simply means that the relationship called thinking is not enclosed in a relationship which can be considered as thinking subjects and knowable object. Here you can see that we can't brand somebody that this person only can think and the other person cannot think but only attain. So here the point is that thinking subject and knowable object, this type of relationship is not enclosed. So, so this is something which can be done by both. So because it extends to other thinking subjects. So one person who is at this moment the thinking subject can be can be transformed into somebody else. So one teacher can be transformed into a student once this dialogue is happening, because then if we mean by a student that a person who is attaining the knowledge, then even the teacher can attain the knowledge by this dialogue which is happening. So we can't say that somebody, one person is the thinking subject and the other person is the knowable object. Both can be interchangeably, uh, like both the parts can be played by each other interchangeably. So Freire believed that teaching is a political process. It must be a democratic process to avoid teaching authority and the dependence. The teacher must learn about, and also the teacher must learn from the student so that knowledge can be constructed in ways that are meaningful to the student. The teacher must become learner and the learner must become teacher. So here you should not consider these words so important. Basically, the attainment of knowledge is very much important. So it should not be branded that one person is a teacher and the other person is a student. So this can't be interchanged. It should happen interchangeably, and then only it will be possible for the learners to become the productive subjects of the meaning or knowledge of the object. So basically in this way only those who are attaining knowledge can become the productive citizens, and they can actually attain the knowledge without any oppression. So it is in this dialectic movement that teaching and learning become knowing and re-knowing. The learners gradually know what they did not know yet, and the educators re-know. At times, what they knew before is actually refurbished, or you can say that it is revised, and it is a lot of things are added into the knowledge which they already have. So in this way, we can say that both are achieving a lot of knowledge, both are acquiring a lot of knowledge. And here, because the dialogue is happening, the process is becoming very much democratic, so there is no oppression. So this is something which is very much focused by Paulo Freire. He was talking a lot about the oppression which actually happened at his time, when there was a kind of distance between the teacher and the taught, and the only way of teaching was that one person is transacting the knowledge to the other person, and without thinking much about what exactly is being given, the person who was accepting the knowledge was actually accepting it. So he was against this oppressionistic way of teaching, and he said that there should be an interchange, there should be a dialectic movement which should be there among the teacher and the taught. So we have talked a lot about the pedagogy of Paulo Freire, which was suggested by him, and in a way we have discussed about the critical pedagogy, but still we have to just make few of those points where he is declaring this critical pedagogy very much political. It is considered to be very much influenced by the politics. So Freire's critical pedagogy talked about the making of the teachers and students aware of the politics that surrounded the education system. The way students are taught and what they are taught serves a political agenda. And at times, even unknowingly, teachers bring that political agenda inside the classroom. So teachers themselves have political notions which at times they bring into the classroom. Few of the times these agendas come inside the classroom unknowingly, and there are few times which may be intentional. So Freire has quoted at one place that education makes sense because women and men learn that through learning they can make and remake themselves, because women and men are able to take responsibility for themselves as being capable of knowing what they know and knowing that they don't. So basically these words reflect that if a person takes the responsibility of the knowledge which he or she is attaining, and he is aware of that what exactly is being given to him, what exactly is being acquired by him or her, then only the sole purpose or the complete purpose of attaining knowledge will be solved. So the purpose of Freire's education actually is liberation from all the bondages. Whenever we attain some sort of education which is influenced by the politics or the thought process which is prevalent at that time, we are not considered as liberated souls. But here Freire talks about the education which is liberated, and the soul's purpose of education is liberation. It is achieved through the authentic dialogue in which everyone speaks their own word with the mediation of the world to name the world. This is, in a nutshell, if we try to explain the pedagogy of the oppressed. Basically, these words which I just quoted are the nutshell, or you can say the crux of pedagogy of the oppressed. Let us just have a look and try to analyze Freire's pedagogy. We are able to identify few of his significant contributions to education, but we should have a look very critically and try to analyze that what exactly are those contributions which are considered very significant whenever we talk about education and this pedagogy which is given by Freire. So the first point which I would like to mention is that emphasis on dialogue, which he has actually made. He made a lot of emphasis on dialogue. We have just talked about a lot on this point. Uh, he upheld that education is a dialogical, or you can say that in very common words, a conversational process rather than a curricular form. So whatever is formal, that is also there, but it should be very much sort of informal or informal or conversational. And this dialogue which is happening should not involve one person acting on another. What does it mean that one person is making the lecture and rest of them are just listening to him or her? This is not considered to be considered as the dialogue. Dialogue should be reciprocal. So If the people are working with each other, they are making all those conversations in a reciprocal manner, then we can say that this dialogue becomes purposeful. So a dialogue not only requires critical thinking but also generates critical thinking in the participants. So in a way, it works as a generator of, or you can say a method of creating critical thinking among the participants, those people who are making the dialogue. The next significant contribution, or the important thing of the pedagogy of Paulo Freire, is the concern with praxis. So action that is informed and linked to certain values. Freire upheld that dialogue should result not only in deepening the understanding, but also in taking informal actions and making a difference in the world. So, whatever dialogues are happening, they should have a purpose, and that purpose should be that we are going to make some sort of difference in the world. So, the value in any sort of value should be attached with whatever is happening in terms of attainment of knowledge. Then the next point, which was emphasized by him, is the concern with conscientization, developing the consciousness. Basically, what does it mean? It means that developing consciousness that is understood to have the power to transform the reality. So whenever we are trying to transform something, we are trying to make or bring some change, for making that, we should be conscious enough. We should understand the entire thing which is going to take a leap, or it is going to take to be changed. So without understanding anything, if we are attaining everything, we are just like in case of a teacher and taught, if the taught or the student is actually making all those things uh, accepting all those things without understanding or without questioning the teacher or the person who is actually uh, giving the knowledge, in that case there will be no soul into that knowledge, and this is not going to have any power which can be transformational. So it is very important to understand whatever is being given to you in terms of transaction of knowledge. Then the next emphasis or the next point which is emphasized is the insistence on lived experience of participants. This is something which is very important. Why? Because uh, if we see the society, if even if we see or observe our classrooms, we will find that there are varied set of students. Those students who are coming from different strata, from different socioeconomic status, from different sort of households. So we have to see that what are the lived experiences of these participants, and these experiences should be made some sort of part of the entire teaching learning process. So provide educational activity to suit the living situation or the experience of the people. So whenever we talk about the pedagogy which is being used inside the classroom, if this pedagogy is taking care of that, what exactly is the spread or the composition of the classroom, who are the students who are coming from a particular set of the the society, and if we take care of and if we try to understand that what are those experiences which these children are having, and if we try to make a dialogue with them where they try to exchange their knowledge, their experiences, these experiences are going to help other students to understand the social practices, and in this way these experiences, the experience sharing, can become a methodology which is enhancing the knowledge of the students. And this is something which can be considered as the very important contribution of Paulo Freire. Even if we go ahead and just have a look to the NCF 2005, we will find this particular experiential setup, or this experience of participants and the sharing of experiences as a major methodology which can be the part of the educational system, which is considered by even the NCF 2005. So these are few of those uh, points which actually display that what exactly is the significant contribution to education by Paulo Freire. So influence of Freire's view can be very properly observed in NCF 2005. Lots of places are there where the NCF talks about the critical pedagogy. So wherein it is mentioned that teaching is no more an activity of planning a lesson or presenting ready-made knowledge for achieving outcomes that can be measured objectively. So basically measuring is again not considered as a very kind of important activity. Gaining knowledge which is practical in a sense, and also the experiences which are already there can be used for attaining some more knowledge which can be used further in life, is given a lot of importance in NCF 2005. At times, NCF talks about the constructivism. Basically, the ethos of NCF 2005 is based on the constructivism, which is a meaning-making process. And here, the role of teacher is again uh, very much likely to be considered as talking about the Freire's pedagogy. So it has been seen as a process of making children think and try out what they are learning. So they should not be a passive takers of whatever is being given to them. They should participate in their own learning. A teacher has to shift away from the traditional outlook of just providing information, or to make the eliciting and guiding a student. The teacher's role is much more. Basically, a teacher's role is a person who should be facilitating the construction of knowledge and engaging the children by, by raising the right kind of questions and organizing well chosen activities and tasks. So basically, in indirect way, this teacher is always there and always being the part of the entire process where the student is getting educated. But directly, any kind of spoon feeding or just information sharing is not happening. So the teacher is just playing a role of a facilitator, and uh, by this facilitation, the construction of knowledge, by the engagement of the children, the construction of knowledge is happening mm, on its own. So active engagement in the quoted words of NCF 2005, active engagement involves inquiry, exploration, questioning, debates, application, and reflection, leading to theory building and creation of ideas, positions. Schools must provide opportunities to question, inquire, debate, reflect, and arrive at concepts or create new ideas. These are the words which are quoted in NCF 2005, and these words basically give an idea that how much influence NCF 2005 has got from the ideology which is being shown by the pedagogical aspects of Paulo Freire. Because he has also talked about the inquiry, the questioning, making debates, dialogue, then the critical understanding of things, logical understanding, and a constant dialogue between the teacher and the student. And all these things are very much enshrined in the ideology which is adapted by NCF 2005. So now we have reached to the end of this lecture. We have talked about Freire's life history in brief at the starting of the lecture. And then we have seen that Freire's perception of society and social relations is based on class relations, because he himself has been the victim of these class relations, and he was facing a lot of differences, the class differences in the early life, uh, when he was struggling with lots and lots of poverty. So he sees social dynamics through the oppressor oppressed dialectic. His pedagogical critique of banking education and his problem posing pedagogical propositions are rooted in his concept of man, where, according to him, here the man is the human being. So Paulo Freire was highly critical of prevailing educational practices, that practices which were prevailing at that time when he was actually growing up. Praxis is interwoven methodological state of human action and reflection. And dialogue is not only a method of education, but an existential necessity for humanization. So these are those things which are mentioned by him when he talked about his pedagogy. Freire firmly believed that knowing is a social process whose individual dimension, however, cannot be forgotten or even devalued. Freire's critical pedagogy, which is very famous and has given a lot of influence to many curricular documents, it talked about making teachers and students aware of the politics that sound, basically that is very much sounded, or which you can say is overpowering the education. Most of the time we can actually, if we critically observe, we can find that. So awareness is the key, where he says that this critical pedagogy is talking about. So we should be aware of that there should be some of those ways in which we can divide this politics, which is actually part of the system. So the way students are taught and what they are taught serves a political agenda, and we we can see that how we can make a limitation, or we can just limit it. So we have analyzed the Freire's pedagogy, what are those components, and what exactly he meant when he is giving suggestions and he is emphasizing his pedagogy. And then we have also seen that how our NCF 2005 is having a lot of impressions, a lot of influences uh, from the pedagogy which is given by Paulo Freire. So which can be seen at many places in the NCF 2005. So these are those important references and suggested links which I have considered while preparation of this lecture. And you can see that there are a lot of books which are authored by Paulo Freire himself, like the very famous book Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And also he has written a lot of many other books like the Pedagogy of Hope, Pedagogy of the Heart, Pedagogy of the City, Pedagogy in Process, and there are a few more books which are authored by him with others. And there are many other authors who have written a lot about Paulo Freire's pedagogy and his thought processes. So few of them are mentioned here, which you can just go ahead and read, because these are those books which will be providing you some sort of awakening whenever you are talking about the transformations which have happened with time in the educational process, and those thoughts, those important changes have got a lot of uh, importance in the entire development of our educational systems. So it is very important to read more about the pedagogy and the different thought processes of Paulo Freire. He himself was a celebrated author, so I hope that you all will read and will be considering these books useful and will go ahead and study more about his thought processes. For today, this is all about this uh, thought process of Paulo Freire. From my side, uh, I am taking leave from you all, and we will see each other in another session, in another lecture. Thank you so much. You were watching a video on philosophical basis of education, and in this lecture we discussed educational ideas of Paulo Freire. This video lecture was recorded by faculty at home during the national lockdown period for COVID-19 pandemic using minimal technical resources. Technical errors, if any, are unintentional and may please be ignored. For any queries with regard to this lecture or broadcast, kindly send your email to techsupport@dth.ac.in. Thank you so much.